Hello, everyone. It's Jerry at the Fledge, and welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. Describe myself real quick. I'm Jerry. I got brown hair, brown eyes. I got my headset on. I'm up in my office at the Fledge, and I'm wearing a Make Space for Others shirt designed by our one and only Dustin Grimes. And today on the show, I'm really excited because we got our great friend Don. How you doing, Don?
Hey, Jer, how you doing? And I'm
So,
doing
uh,
great myself. I've got my Columbia shirt. I've got my freshly groomed white gray hair, which is the byproduct of lots of time and experience. And I'm chilling in my office in Mason.
All right. Have you always had a beard? I can't remember not.
I've had it off and on for the most part, but I've had it more than I've not.
Yeah.
My kids won't let me shave it anymore, so I don't look like dad anymore, and my grandkids don't think I look like grandpa anymore. So
It
I
it used to
still don't.
it used to scare me when my dad shaved his beard when I was a kid because it was like he does not look like my dad anymore.
Yeah, no, I like it overall. Although I play Santa Claus at Christmas time, and I have to glue a Santa Claus beard to my face, and that always I have to trim the mustache real short so I don't get messed up with the spirit gum that I used to glue the hair on.
Yeah. So let's jump into you. Tell us
Mhm.
something about you. Like where were you born and raised and went to school and all that
Okay.
stuff?
Well, I was born and raised in a downriver Detroit area in a suburb called Taylor. My father was an engineer at Ford Motor Company, and I was just a kid knocking around the neighborhood. I've been working since I was 10. I was a paper boy. I delivered newspapers 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Every morning at 4:30, I delivered the Detroit Free Press. So I did that, until I was old enough to buy a car and get a real job. So I've been kind of kicking ever since. That's what I did. I loved it's just a plain old middle class family in the auto manufactured generated suburbs of Detroit.
Yeah. I was talking to my dad the other day. He was talking about his first job, he was 8 years old. He used to work at the Norse grocery on the west side of Lansing.
Mhm.
And then I look at my granddaughter who's 8 and think she can barely get up and down the street. I would be so worried about that. But back
Yeah,
then it was a lot different, wasn't it?
it was different. Yeah, and it was very cool because I had my own money. I had to deal with paying the distributor who gave me the newspapers and generating and figure out what my net profit was and what I could do with it. So I saved up. I bought I had a really cool 10 speed back when 10 speeds came out. I had a unicycle. I used to ride a unicycle around because again I had spare cash to buy things that I wanted to buy, and it was those were good life lessons. And I grew my route to the point where I split it and I gave half of it to my brother, and then the two of us grew the rest of the neighborhood and gave it to my other brother. So the three of us had a monopoly in our neighborhood. So
So, that was what in the 80s sometime, probably early 70s,
that
60s. I
was
don't know.
yeah, early 70s. I was born in 1960, so I got my paper out in 1970, and I did it till 76. When I got a job working at a pool store as a mechanic, I was repairing pool filters.
Ah.
I somehow
When,
convinced the manager that I could do that, even though I'd never done it before. And
and
and I
were
did
you
it.
able to do it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've always had a kind of a mechanical knack, so I was able to, if I could take it apart, I could figure out why it worked or didn't work, and then figure out how to fix it and put it back together. So that, uh, I've always kind of had that. I was always taking our bikes apart, doing this or that to them, and trying to make things. I mean, I tried to make I was interested in scuba diving, so I tried to convert a regular air compressor into a set of like an above snuba thing, and
Yeah.
about blew my face off when I tried to make a regulator, and it wasn't really regulating. He was just giving me 200 psi right into my mouth.
You didn't have an Arduino or something helping
No,
you?
no, 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 nothing like that. Nothing like that in those days.
So you must have graduated high school around 78 or something like
78,
that?
yes, 1978. Yeah,
S-
and I was going to be an architect. I had an interest in drafting, and I wanted to go to Lawrence Tech, but I didn't have the grades. I was one of these really bored students in high school. I was unmotivated. I mean, I had great classes and I loved them. I loved learning. I just didn't like grades that much, and I didn't like tests.
Yeah.
And I did enough to get by, but when it came to going to college, I ended up at Eastern Michigan, and I decided to go into business for lack of anything else. My best friend went there; it sounded like a good idea, and I flunked out after one semester. I became a really awesome foosball player.
Foosball, really?
I was the foosball master, and I still have a pretty solid wrist shot, but I just wasn't motivated, and I flunked out, and much to the disappointment of my parents. But I started going to school. I went to a community college, and started looking into the sciences, and I eventually started looking at psychology. And then at one point, I ended up at Henry Ford Community College in Dearborn, and I took a computer class while I was trying to pursue a degree in accounting. So again, bouncing all over the place because I didn't really know what I wanted. And when I took that intro to computers class, suddenly I found something that just absolutely made sense. And I loved every bit of it. And I started taking some programming classes, and I loved it. I mean, I learned Fortran at the time. I learned COBOL. And real soon after that, I actually got hired at a company in 1982. And went to work for a company called R.L. Polk. And they were a company that made their money. They've been around since 1870. They made city directories, like phone books. And they were one of the first companies that actually utilized computers to do compiling back in the very, very early days of computing. And they had a big shop in the town where I grew up. I didn't even know about them. They had a data center. They had programmers. So I went to work in their computer room working on a big giant mainframe. And my job was putting paper in printers because they printed direct mail is what they were doing.
Yeah.
Eventually I went into working in operations. So I was actually managing the mainframe area where we were running jobs on, tapes and even 80-column cards in those days.
Yeah.
While I was doing that, I worked a midnight shift, and overnight we'd go to run jobs, and occasionally these programs would fail, and they would get something, they produced like 6 or 8 inch stacks of green bar paper, which was just a big core memory dump. And I figured out, I kind of nosed around in the programming department and found some manuals, and I figured out how to write code and fix programs. So I would fix the programs at night and then get them running, and we'd run them so the next morning they were done, which I thought was a great idea. The programming manager didn't think much of it because I wasn't a programmer. So they had some harsh words for me and then immediately transferred me into programming.
Quit screwing around with our programs.
Exactly.
But now you can screw around.
Teach you how to do it. Right. Yeah. We're going to teach you the right way to do it. Because I would just go and fix it. And oftentimes I would make a program run that was actually running wrong, but it had the correct syntax.
Yeah. I just did a show with another guy that's a developer, and he also was talking about grades and school and didn't really fit in. And I told him, I think every great developer I ever hired never finished school for that exact same reason. They were always looking for something that wasn't there.
Right. No, absolutely right. It was just, again, I loved learning and I loved my classes. I didn't like the pace of college. So I actually never even finished a degree. I went into programming, programmed a few years, ended up going into systems development. I was writing machine code, writing assembler code, and writing some of the first. Jerry, you've been around technology. Do you remember something called CICS?
Yes, of course.
Okay, yeah. So it was one of the early days. It was one of the early products for building applications. Mm-hmm. And so I used to write that, and I loved it. I mean, God, programming was like, there's nothing better than having a tough, challenging routine you have to write, and then you figure out a cool way to do it in a way that does things like uses instructions that peels like nanoseconds off of an execution. So it was fun. I mean, I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
I started out in computer science in college and then switched to math because of assembly language.
Really?
I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't. It was too much detail.
That's my favorite language. Oh yeah, because there's absolutely nothing I can't write code for.
It's so close to the machine.
You're kind of limited by functions or the specific syntax. But in assembler, there's always a way to write something, and there's probably like 8 different ways to do it. So I loved it, and you could get as crazy or not as crazy as you want. So it was a really fun platform. I wrote with it for like almost 10 years. So
you're really good at hex and all that too?
Oh yeah, hexadecimal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Yeah, and
Nice.
that was fun. And I also got introduced to some of the first databases in the time. So I used to work with a database. It was called Model 204. It was actually built and designed it was designed for the military. And
Hmm.
what it was a architecture that it was a platform. It was a software that ran on a mainframe, and it gave you access to indexed level data. So you could actually write SQL-like queries, and you could also put together applications. So we built these giant applications that would run. Polk was a marketing company, so our clients always wanted to know, well, how many people do I have in this zip code that drive this car and have this many kids and this occupation and this income, blah 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 blah, whatever. And this application enabled non-programming people to actually generate those numbers and
Mm.
get counts themselves instead of them having to write an order, send it to an analyst who would write specs and send them to me, and I would write the code. And
Yeah.
that was a big deal. That was in 1990, and I was I was involved in a team that put the first national database of compiled consumer data up available in an online scenario. And it was fun because the platforms didn't support us doing all this work. So I had to come up with these really crazy ways to, you know, load data, back it up to tape, load more files, back it up to tape, load more, back it up to tape. And then when you're all done, you delete the current production version and restore the new one and pray that everything restores properly. I mean, it was crazy, but it was, again, it was kind of the very beginning of that type of an environment. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was fun. It was opportunity to be creative. Um, we created this, again, I'm not how much time I've got here. We did, this is actually a really cool story.
Tell
We,
it.
we had this database and it's running and people are running counts all day long and using the database and, processes are updating tables and this and that. And eventually any database table that gets updated frequently starts to get inefficient. The
Hmm.
data is stored inefficiently, you lose free space, and it starts to slow down. And if it gets to the point where it fails, it goes through this huge um, unload and then restore itself. And it takes a lot of time. And, we'd get to the point where if our database did this, it could be 6-8 hours where the system was offline. And that was unacceptable. So I was trying to figure out how we could prevent this from happening. So we wrote these functions that allowed us to do these checks periodically just to see how efficient our database was. And if we noticed that it was getting inefficient, we would schedule restore programs, backup restores that would run overnight during a downtime so that it would keep the system healthy. The problem is you had to remember to run those programs, and you had to remember if you found that you had to do something, you had to remember to do it. And, as we all know, people are not infallible. They go on vacation, they get sick, they transfer to different departments. So I was reading a magazine on an airplane one time, and there was a product called Hlappi, HLAPPI, high level host level application programming interface. And what it was a piece of code that you could write that would run on a PC that was running a terminal emulator, and the program would talk to the emulator, which would talk to the mainframe. So we wrote this program and taught it to do the checks that we were doing manually. And when it found a potential problem, it would send us an email and tell us to do our work. And then I thought, well,
Hmm.
if it could send me an email, it could do the damn work.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
programmed it to run the checks. If it found an issue, it would do the preventative maintenance, and then it would just tell us that it did it. And that worked great. And but we had to, we had to give this piece of software a login. To give it a login, it had to be an employee. So we created this persona called Donald Hollinger. And Jerry, you may not be old enough to remember this. Donald Hollinger was a character on the show That Girl with Marlo Thomas back in the 60s.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
don't remember that.
okay, well, anyways, Donald Hollinger became a persona. He had an entry in HR. He had an actual logon, and he lived on a computer that had a piece of paper with his picture on it. And it
Hmm.
just sat in this cubicle, and it ran all day long, and it did all of our preventative maintenance for us. And we never had a problem with databases failing after that.
Did you open a bank account and cash his paychecks for
We
him too?
did not. We did not. We never thought of that. But we eventually created a couple other personas that did other specialized tasks. And what it enabled is my group to maintain this giant database that had about three or 400 users at the time, and we were pushing out about 1 billion records a year that became different types of jobs, mailing lists, telemarketing lists, files that were going to customers, files that were used internally, and all kinds of different things. And it was all done almost 100% by these three personas that lived on PCs inside this cubicle with wires coming over the wall because it really wasn't designed to host that stuff. And meanwhile, my department kept shrinking because we didn't need people as much. But we had this increased productivity, this increased capacity for correct execution, for low downtime, and it was probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever gone through as a developer. And that was when I kind of realized, and actually I didn't realize it then, but I realized it later, that I was actually being intrapreneurial at the time, because nobody asked us to do this stuff. We just came up with the ideas. I found some PC hardware that had been decommissioned, so I put these boxes and I stuck bigger hard drives in them. I threw extra memory chips to make them a little bit more robust, and set them up to do all this work. And again, it was kind of funny when I look back at it, because people don't just do that sort of thing usually.
Yeah.
And to me, it just seemed like, well, that's just what you should be doing. So.
And well, especially back then, because that was in the phase transition from mainframes to PCs too, right?
Right. Because we'd gone from mainframes, where we used to execute everything on terminals, to having PCs that were running terminal emulation software. So we were running in two different environments. So we're doing, desktop stuff on the PC, but then still communicating directly to the mainframe to do all the mainframe stuff. So yeah, and I wrote programs that kind of lived in both space. We owned a company in New Hampshire that was. They built one of the first spatial databases in the country. So lat longs and boundary files and things. And I'd take all these files, which were stored in EBCDIC, like you talked about earlier, and I would transfer them to my PC. Or what I would do is I'd run them through an assembler program that would break them into smaller files. I would transfer them to the PC and generate files for PC-based mapping programs. And same sort of thing. I wrote an assembler program that would run this big loop, essentially, and it would go through the entire U.S. of boundary data and create files for every zip code in the country, or every county, or every marketing unit, or whatever, as separate individual files.
So when Amazon sends me an ad or something, or Google or whatever now, predicting what I'm going to want tomorrow before I even know it, we can sort of blame you for that, right?
Oh, yeah. I've had a wonderful career making everything from junk mail, and I eventually transitioned to the digital space so I could start making spam and every other piece of unwanted, what people perceive as unwanted. But the reality of it is, it's highly targeted opportunities to make purchases that are both interest and value to the recipient.
Yeah. I don't think they call it junk mail. I think they call themselves pre-sorters, right?
No, they're highly targeted direct mailers.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Is that what they are now?
What's funny, because direct mail's had a resurgence.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of it going on. It's still appropriate in certain instances.
Yeah. I was in that industry for about 10 years. I actually wrote a standard for the post office called Mail Process Total Quality Management.
Okay.
That was for all the guys that did that.
Yeah.
So,
I wrote one of the. I was on the team that wrote one of the first NCOA systems back when that was released in the mid-late 80s by the post office. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. When I look back at it, I got to be a part of a lot of neat things, and I enjoyed it.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You kind of student lost in the system maybe, and you hard working, got into tech, and became an intrapreneur. But I know you as an entrepreneur.
Right. Well, what happened was in the mid 90s, my company went through a reorganization, and basically every person in the company had to reapply for a job within the organization. They were trying to figure out how to get rid of a lot of unproductive resources, and this was their plan to do it. I worked in IT. I worked on some key projects, so I was one of the few people in the company that was remapped into my existing job into the new organization. But I looked at it as like, well, this is an opportunity to do something different. So I actually applied for a job in the organization in a new department the company was forming called marketing. And I went to work as a new business, new product development manager. So my job was to identify and evaluate new opportunities, bring them to the executive board of the company, and try and get budget to do different things. So does it sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a pitch. So that's what I did. So between 1994 and 2000, I was looking at all the new technologies that were popping up and doing everything from suggesting new products to identifying companies that would be great acquisition targets. So all during the .com phase. So that was crazy. I spent a great deal of time in, Austin's and Seattle's and Palo Alto and San Francisco, Cambridge. I mean, all the hot spots in the country. Vancouver. I spent 18 months working at a project in Vancouver. I mean, talk about the dream scenario for a developer.
Yeah.
So I got to be a developer, yet I was being trained in the business aspect of product. So it was a riot. And during that time, I realized that there was a certain gap in my abilities. I mean, there was things I didn't know. So I decided to go back to college. So I had almost 2 years worth of classes under my belt. I found out about this program at Cleary College, which is Cleary University now. And they had a program designed for people that were professionals that had been working in a field for X amount of time, and they were trying to fill in and get their bachelor degree. So I signed up for a program in a curriculum called quality management. So it was all about, ISO and QS stuff in manufacturing. But it worked with me because I only had to go to school every other Friday night and all day on Saturday. So that worked with my life. I didn't know anything about quality management at the time, but again, the curriculum seemed okay. It matched my schedule, seemed like a good deal. And my company had a program where they would pay for 75% of your tuition if you took a class or took classes that applied to what you do for a living, your job, and you pass it with good grades. So I'm like, sounds like a win-win. So I did this program. I did 12 months worth of study. I earned 76 credits, finished off a bachelor's degree, graduated with honors, and got my company to pay for 3/4 of it.
Nice.
Phenomenal opportunity for me. The company, of course, changed their plan as far as what they would allow for tuition reimbursements within a given semester, because they didn't plan on somebody going and doing at the level I was doing. But again, as an intrapreneur at the time, I saw opportunities. I saw that there were set parameters for that opportunity, and I saw I could kind of twist them a little bit to work for me, and I did it. And I got my degree and finished off. And as it turns out, the whole quality management concept, the theories and teaching of quality, were very similar to the things I went through to build software programs and software systems. So very, very similar curriculum, very similar methodologies and theories. So everything that applied for building a quality manufacturing project applied for doing software development and doing systems development. So work like a champ. And I still, to this day, I still think in terms of quality, in terms of repeatability, confidence, all those different terms that are so familiar to anybody who's in the quality space. I think about that as I'm writing software. So.
I made a life out of math, statistics, software development, and quality management. I mean, that was my career for 30 some years, all tied together.
Yeah. And it applies so many different places in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, in almost every job you do, almost anything, if you're building anything, if you're creating anything, there's such value to all that stuff. I mean, you're learning about all those different concepts of understanding voice of the customer and, all those theories. I mean, it was great. It was fantastic. I loved it. I loved it,
Yeah.
And it was also right around the time that internet was kind of like popping up out of nowhere. And I found myself able to do all this work while traveling. So I'm on planes, I'm in hotel rooms, writing papers, doing research, because I was traveling a lot at the same time I did this program. So it was a very busy 12 months.
So what was so then you became an entrepreneur.
Right. I did that. I stayed on for about another year. In 2000, I left Polk. I had some friends that had left during the reorganization, and they had started a company in Ann Arbor. And I'd been in communication with them, and they were always saying, "Yeah, Don, we want you to come work with us. Why don't you come work with us? We just have to have enough business to afford you." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So some things were happening at the company I was at, and I was concerned about what I was going to do next there. I'd done everything I wanted to do. There was nothing really left I wanted. And there were things going on that I was just it was making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. So I gave them a call one day and I said, guys, I'm ready to make the jump. So they called me back a couple hours later, made an offer to me. I went and talked to my wife about it, and she said, sure, go ahead. So I joined a company. It was two founders, one other junior partner, and myself. And I was the IT department.
Hmm.
And it was a company that was doing things very similar to what Polk was doing, except they were trying to do it using servers instead of mainframes. So I went on board to be their IT guy. And at the time, I was going to be the liaison that would communicate with all of our vendors who were actually supplying the actual technology. The founders just didn't want to talk to technology guys. And they knew that I could talk to technology guys, but I could also talk to them. So I was that middleware piece. And so, I remember going there. I remember my first week on the job, and we had a power failure. And when the power came back, none of our network didn't work. Nothing was working. So I went and talked to one of the founders. I says, so what do we got to do here? He says, well, we got to start everything up in the right sequence. And I said, start everything in the right sequence. I said, somebody should write up a document that we could stick on the wall. What's the proper startup sequence for the network? Router, switches, modems, all those things. He's like, that's a great idea. He says, why don't you do that? And that became the somebody rule. So in our organization, if you say somebody should do something, just replace the word somebody with your own name and get the damn thing done. And that's the way we worked as a company. Fun organization. It was about probably about $500,000 in revenue when I joined them with four of us. And within 4 years, we were at $25 million in annual sales, and we still were only 20 employees.
Yeah.
So we built some very, very successful products that.
And eventually you changed your name to Alphabet, right? You were one of the first 4 employees at Google.
No, it wasn't
I'm just kidding.
No. And it was, again, it was a great, we were just a bunch of guys that wanted to have some fun, make some products, sell things at a good price, and enjoy the hell out of what we were doing. We really weren't planning on building a company. We were just trying to have fun and do the things we all enjoyed. And of what became 5 of us that were the core owners of the company, all but one had been kicked out of college. We all finished, but we all had rough starts through college. We had a tendency to not get along with professors, not get along with teachers in high school. We had problems with authority. We were those problem children. But every one of us was creative, and not a one was afraid to roll up their sleeves and figure out what had to get done to make things work. And in a small company like ours, I had the opportunity to do everything from write programs, write code, order and configure hardware. I designed 2 different data centers and managed the construction and implementation. I got to manage budgets of multi-million dollars worth of budgets for hardware. I became the chief technology officer, and just got to do things that I never expected to do. I mean, I remember getting my first server, and I ordered it. It came. I opened it. I set it up. I didn't want to turn it on. I was afraid it wasn't going to do. I didn't even know what a server really did. I worked with servers, but I only worked with them because it was the T drive on my PC in the network. I had no idea what the server really was. So after we ordered it, I had to go, enroll in some classes, learn how to do network security, server configuration, blah, 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 all those different things. So I know what to do until we were big enough to actually afford to hire somebody that could do that for me. And then I started, then I focused mostly on the data side. My partner focused on the hardware side and the application side. So the two of us did a lot of work together. We worked really well. And it turns out that guy was actually my brother. We had similar interests, similar backgrounds, but and overlap in things that we knew, but we had some distinct things that we knew, as individuals. So we could back each other up, yet the two of us together became this really great team. And we built some big things. We had, we built a program that supported every one of Goodyear's dealerships throughout the country, plus about 1,200 of their independent dealers that sold their products. We built a program that serviced every one of the State Farm insurance agents in the country. We came up with an idea, we configured it, we planned it, we bought the hardware, We configured it, and we had it launched within a month of getting a PO. And that's the way we work.
Amazing.
I mean, there was no such thing as like what's 9 to 5. I mean, you worked how long you needed to make it work. You stuck around and did things that needed to get done. I mean, I was doing things like setting up a pillow. I'd bring a sleeping bag to work because we had an internet outage, but still work had to get done. So we couldn't do things remotely. So I had to go there and do it on site. I mean, that's what you did, and that was how I kind of became more of an entrepreneur than an intrapreneur. So I was working for a company, but it was still just a small group of people. We kind of each had our roles, and we all worked together, and we all thought alike. So one person would come up with an idea, and the other two guys were already finishing his sentences because we all thought the same way. It was a great mix of people. And I did that for about 8 years. And then the economy kind of tanked. We lost a couple of big clients, and the company needed to move forward, and they had to make some hard decisions. And, I was probably the easiest guy to cut because being a quality person, every product I built, every system I set up, documented, cross-trained. I mean, they could take me out of the picture. Everything would continue, which is the way I designed that piece of it. That's the way a good operations guy should do. Or that's what they should do. They should make it so that people can be replaced. They can take vacations. They can get sick. They can move on to other opportunities, and the business continues. And that's the way I did it. And so it was a logical choice. It was a hard choice for me because I'd never lost a job in my life. But I found myself in 2007 being without or 2008 being without a job. I had nothing, and nobody was hiring at the time. They certainly weren't hiring a CTO who managed 6 people. And, because I was either too much of a manager or too much of a technician for any one of those either jobs. I couldn't get a tech job. I couldn't get a administrative job because I just didn't fit the mold. Yeah. And so after about a month and a half, I decided to form Deep Blue Insights. I became a consultant. And I hung my shingle out there, and I started hooking up with anybody that I ever connected with on LinkedIn, all my old colleagues, all my old friends. I had a lot of people that I'd worked with that had gone off and created their own companies. So I became a hired gun, and they would hire me to do a project. They all liked working with me, but they couldn't afford me to hire me because they were all small companies too. So it was a good mix. I mean, I could do a project work and have a few clients and go off and had a great life. The buyout from the previous company put my kids, kept my life going, put my kids through college, and eventually Deep Blue Insights became, after a year, it totally displaced the income I'd lost. And I ran that business until about 2017 was when I actually joined a company again. So during that time, that's when Jerry and I became acquainted. We both were pitching at the hatching, I think at the same night one time.
Was it?
I think you beat me.
I won, so.
You did. Yeah, I was pitching. At the time I was hiring interns, and during their internship, I would make them come up with a product idea and try and get them to build either a business plan or build a pitch to pitch the idea. So my nephew was working for me at the time, and we were pitching shin armor, which was like a Gore-Tex shields that you put on your legs. They're like to protect your shins when you're out doing the weed whacking, so you don't get grass clippings all over your legs and your shoes. So that was our idea. But
was that at Beggars?
Yep.
So we had to pitch against that mom and those kids that sang their whole presentation.
No. That was a later one. That was Kendra. She was one of my friends from BNI, and I was coaching her on the pitch. So
that's who I pitched against.
Oh, really? Okay, because I know I'd met you before. Maybe maybe we didn't pitch against each other, but you won against her. I remember that. Yeah, she sang her pitch. That was our idea. I said, "This is great. People love it."
I shouldn't have won. That was cute. Should always win, and the kids were amazing.
Yeah. Well, there was one pitch I saw. It was these kids were pitching a potato slicer.
Yeah.
Making chips or something like that. And they had all these attempts to try and do it that didn't work, like throwing a potato up in the air, hitting it with a tennis racket, and, shooting it with a shotgun. I mean, they were always trying to figure out ways to, make better chips and fries. But while I was doing Deep Blue Insights, I also formed a company called virtual house sitter. So my idea was taking some of the newer Z-Wave type platforms and building monitoring systems for people that had second homes that they leave open all year round. Okay, so that they can manage and control things like temperature and, understand if anybody's intruding, or if there's water in the basement, or, the refrigerator's still working, et cetera, remote cameras and such. And while I was doing that, I joined a pitch competition. I'm trying to remember what it was called. They used to offer it, and they hosted it at the Harvey Center at Michigan State. And I can't remember what it was, but I was doing during that time. I met some
Greenlight.
folks. That wasn't Project Greenlight. It was a different one. I just can't remember what it was. It was they did two things. They did a business plan and a business summary type of thing. I can't remember, but it was in the course of that I got asked to do this thing. It was a program at Michigan, at U of M, your old stomping grounds. It was called Product Realization and Commercialization of New Ideas. So me and like 10 other entrepreneurs were put through about 3 months worth of training on all the aspects of commercializing ideas. And great training, again, that I took, and I enjoyed it. And in the course of that, I met a guy who wanted me to form a networking group up in Lansing for entrepreneurs to get together and just talk about opportunities and ideas and cross-sharing ideas and things learned, lessons learned, etc. And that group eventually became ICE. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
The Innovators Club for Entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And a professor from Michigan State and I organized it and put that together, and we used to host meetings. And that group eventually was turned over to Sam Carter, and it became the Hatching.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, again, it's been a crazy journey, man. I eventually became a client or an employee of one of my clients. I was on a full-time retainer for one of my clients for several years, and they wanted to go on the market and sell themselves, and they decided they would be more valuable if I was an employee as opposed to being a consultant. So I joined the company, acquired some equity, and 2 years later, we were sold. So I got yet another buyout, and we were bought by a company called Claritas, which is the company I work for now. And Claritas is a company that uses compiled data, like from the Epsilons or the Equifaxes and TransUnions and such.
Mm-hmm.
And they build all these very specialized predictor profile models. So if you want to sell to somebody who's looking to buy, Progressive insurance in the next 6 months, they have a model for you. So they've got 6,000 different models that do all kinds of different things. And ironically, in my very early days of working at Polk, I worked with their data in our database. So it's kind of yet another full circle thing. And in the course of my position at Claritas, I work with a company called Epsilon, which bought the marketing services division from Equifax, which bought the marketing services division from Polk. So a lot of the guys I worked with in the old days at Polk are now I'm their customer, working with the same database I helped to develop, and the same database application I helped to develop in 1990. So it's kind of crazy how it all works. But,
If people think the world is small just because of the internet, when you're in development, when you're in software, when you're in things like that, it's even smaller.
Oh yeah, especially if you're in a particular vertical, you run into the same people all the time, and that's what's happened to me. I've run into everything from customers I've had, or vendors I've had, or colleagues I've worked with. We run into each other all the time. I find out, I'm scheduled for a meeting, and I look at the list of attendees, and I'm like, oh, I know that person. We work together over here. And then when the meeting starts, we spend the first 10 minutes just getting reacquainted, and everybody else sits around and is like, oh crap, why did I come to this meeting?
So, we talked before the show about you're kind of using all of this experience now to really fold it into the community and helping the community. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I spent like the first almost 30 years of my career driving a long distance to work. I worked in the Detroit area. I worked in Southfield. I worked in Ann Arbor. I live in Leslie. Okay, so I was driving, 40 miles, 70
Well,
miles.
when was that?
Pardon me?
When was that?
When was that?
What years?
From 1984.
Okay.
I'm sorry, no, from 1987 until 2007. So almost 30 years. 30 years.
So I lived on Pleasant Lake
Okay.
and drove to downtown Detroit working
Mhm.
for Unisys from 89 to 92.
So we drove down 94 together. How do
Yeah,
we
I
not have
probably
that?
honked at you.
Pardon me?
I probably honked at you a bunch of times. Get out of the
Probably.
way.
I was a guy driving these crappy old, everything from Pintos to Tempos to Escorts because they were basically disposable cars because I was putting like 50,000 miles a year on them and
Yeah.
squeezing my big 6 foot 3 foot ass into these little cars. But it was, it was what you did, And but what I'm doing now that's really fun is because I live close to Mason. My office is in Mason. I live like 15 minutes from work. When I opened my office here in 2008, I joined the chamber, and I started getting involved in different things. I went from the chamber. I joined the chamber. I joined a Rotary Club. I worked with Building 21 for a while as
Yeah.
a board member. And now I'm working with, last several years, I've been working with Relay for Life Greater Lansing. So what I'm trying to do is use all those skills that I've learned over the years working in business, like how to get stuff, how to get people to do stuff, how to find people, who do you know? I mean, I know everybody in this market, and I find that it works really well to help with these different community projects. So I'd like to help get things done. I'm on my 5th out of 6 years on the board of directors at the chamber. I was president of the Rotary for a year. And then the Relay for Life, my daughters and I are on the executive leadership team for the last couple of years, and we help organize and run the Relay for Life event for the greater Lansing area. So we work on that program 12 months of the year, planning, trying to get teams to join, people to join teams, trying to get sponsorships, and similarly for Rotary and for everything else. It's all about. I mean, everything you do is all about knowing how to find the right people that can help you with your cause, that are willing to participate and contribute, and then getting them to do things. Jerry, you know this better than anybody I know. I mean, you're a wizard at finding people and resources to make things, work for what your dreams are, to follow through with what you're trying to accomplish. So I try and do something very similar, except instead of directing it towards my professional career, because now as I'm looking at somehow retiring at some point, which just means I no longer work for a company. I'm going to go start some other type of business.
Yeah.
But right now I'm really enjoying working with the community. And the nice thing is because I was doing it, my daughters are now doing it. So they're both, I've got one that's working. She was working for the food bank in Leslie. The other one, she lives in Mason, but during the pandemic last year, she was organizing food trucks all year round to come in and supply food and dinners to her neighborhood. And she would get the neighborhood to pre-buy all their food. So these trucks would show up and they don't have to sell anything. They basically just open the doors and collect the money.
Yeah.
Again, that community spirit, that notion that you're involved and belong to something above and beyond yourself and your own little small bubble, that we're all a part of something larger, I think is really, really important. And I'm more than proud of the fact that, my kids are doing the same thing. So
Do you consider yourself a social entrepreneur now, at least in that space?
I guess if I was going to put a name on it, yeah, it's kind of funny. I really didn't. I've never really been one to give a name to what I do. I just go off and do things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love to think or love to say to myself is, you don't know what you can't do. And I'm fortunately or unfortunately, I guess it's a matter of perspective. I'm one of those guys that if I'm in a room and somebody says, well, we really need somebody to do this, and I look around and I don't see a whole lot of hands going up, I usually raise my hand. Just like I happened to catch a post about a week and a half ago, and Jerry's pleading for somebody to join his, every damn day cast. So I said, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I'm just going to do it. So I raised my hand then too.
Well, thank you so very much for that, by the way. We're always looking for guests on every damn day. We gotta get through 177 more shows after today. So, what would you say your mission is? I mean, every company, organization has a mission. People have missions. However you want to describe it. What mission are you on right now?
My mission is to have an impact on the community I'm a part of. And however big that community is, just depends. I mean, it could be my house, my home, my family, my neighborhood, the community where my office is, where I work. I want to be remembered as somebody who was someone that could be counted on to help get things done when things needed to get done. So that's really what I consider my mission.
Yeah.
I do things because I enjoy it. I enjoy being a part of things. I enjoy the satisfaction of helping other people. And I don't really care about being rich. I mean, I consider myself rich beyond all imagination with the satisfaction and happiness and experiences that I've had. I mean, every step of the way during my career, I've always made a point of having fun and enjoying things and trying to live my bucket list all the time.
Yeah.
Things, I don't save things for later. I don't say, well, someday I'm going to do this, someday I'm going to do that. If I want to do it and I want to do it bad enough, I'm going to do it now. And, I've done, God, the things I've done, it's just, I sometimes lose track. Again, it's just have fun while you're here, man. Life's too short. Have fun, help other people, make other people glad you were part of their life. That's what I think is really important.
Are you answering the every damn day question?
Probably.
Is that something you do every damn day?
I try and think about every day how I'm impacting somebody else. And, it's kind of morbid, but I like to think about how I'm going to be remembered someday. I think immortality comes from people remembering you for being a fun guy, a great guy, a loving person, somebody could be counted on in the community, somebody that people were proud to have known. And that's what I try. That's what I hope for. It's really what I hope for.
I try to manage my regrets. I don't want to have regrets on my deathbed. Like, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids or whatever.
100%. I have no regrets that I can think of at this point. I mean, if I look back, you can never really look back and say, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that. Because if I'd done that, the rest of your life would have been different, and there's things that, I wish I hadn't put my parents through the pain and agony of having their firstborn son get kicked out of college. But on the same token, the rest of my life's been pretty good. And my mother is constantly saying this in the most loving way as possible. I never expected you to turn out as well as you did. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Mom.
You got to go in low with setting those expectations.
That's
then
right.
you
Set
exceed
the bar
them.
low, under promise, over deliver.
So we daisy chained the shows together. I knew you and I were going to run long because we've known each other for a long time, and you have a great story. But let's. Yesterday on the show we had Peter Reeves, and he's an entrepreneur, a very technical guy, going for big SBIRs and stuff. And when I told him you were going to be on the show, he's like, ask him where he finds his talent, which made me chuckle because it's a difficult task. So
it's a challenge now. Yeah, it really is. Now, the cool thing is, because of the nature of remote working, people don't have to be in the same physical location all the time. I'm trying to hire a programmer right now. I would love to have that person work with me in my office in Mason, when they have to come to an office. I'm just not finding it. This market is so saturated with employed people. They're just not looking for work. But I think because we do have the opportunity to work with people wherever they're at, and you don't have to get them to, pull up roots and move somewhere else, which I think is great. You and I, I'm sure, I know you spent time working overseas, and I've had a lot of opportunities to relocate, and I just opted not to. I didn't want to move away from our family. My wife and I, our families are all here. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to take my kids away from grandparents, things like that. But nowadays, you really don't have, and part of the pandemic, we really learned how well we really could work by just sitting in our offices and wearing a nice shirt and a pair of shorts. Yeah.
The pandemic's definitely proven a couple of hypotheses around remote working for sure. So a bad things, but a lot of good things are coming out of it too.
People work too much. People work too
That's
much. I mean, I've had the ability to work remote since the early 90s, and I know I've worked way more than I should have.
mhm.
But again, as I've mentioned earlier, I never really believed in, time clocks, and when work needs to get done, I like to get work done. So
Yeah.
I just try and work around it out of not impacting my family. So I wait till everybody goes to bed, and then I like to work really late.
Yeah. I used to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can. I'm too old. I go to sleep at 9. Um, Tomorrow on the show, we've got a mutual friend, Victoria
Mm-hmm.
from Leap. What would you like me to pass on to Victoria for your
I
question?
would like to say that I am really looking forward to the day where we can have another in-person hatching event. There's nothing that compares to the thrill of watching people pitch and seeing the enthusiasm of an audience. And I miss being in person and judging those things, and then spending time afterwards just talking about different things with the folks that have pitched, as well as people that are interested in pitching later. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
love the interaction. I really do.
I always thought, the best part about the hatching, obviously, for the contestants is, getting up there and pitching and putting themselves out there, whether they win or not.
Mhm.
But for the crowd and the judges and everybody, it's that after party. It's the mingling afterwards. And I miss that so,
I
so
miss it
much.
so much. I really, really do. I really,
So,
really do.
and we
Especially
wanted,
the big annual event that we used to have.
oh, that was amazing, wasn't it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I
So
love it.
we'll get back. I'll ask her. We'll try to
Okay,
pin her down on a date. I
sounds
know
good.
she's not going to be committal, though. I'm sure of it. um, so I started asking a new question recently when we hit our halfway mark, which was about 7 days ago, and it is, what is happiness to you, and are you happy?
Um, I am. First off, I'm extremely happy. I've got a good job. I've got employer that loves me, what I do. I'm probably underpaid, but I have a great deal of satisfaction every day. I get to write really cool things, and deep down, I've always loved writing code. I still write code, and I'm still astounded that I can learn something new and apply it and come up with a new way of doing things. So I love that professionally. Personally, um, I have a great family. I have two adult daughters that my wife and I raised that became great adults. They're contributing to their community. They're off budget 100% for several years now. I have two lovely granddaughters, 2 and 4, that are just, it's exciting as hell to watch them grow. So I have a great life. I have everything I've ever really wanted. I've went and got. Um, I have a beautiful wife that has been incredibly tolerant of my wild ass notions that I'm always coming home with. It's like, hon, this will be great. Just trust me. Just trust me. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Trust me. It'll be great. It'll be fine. And however it turns out, we figure it out. You know how it is. Things don't work. You try something different.
That's right.
So from that perspective, yes, I can't, I couldn't imagine planning a better life than the one I've had, in all honesty. So I'm
Yeah.
incredibly satisfied, incredibly happy, incredibly blessed, and thankful every day for the people that I've had in my life, both personally and professionally, that have, shared the journey with me. So yeah,
Now I'm going to ask you a really tough question,
sure.
and something because now you got to do better than that, maybe. Uh, what would you like to take us out with as we wrap up here?
Well, I like to take it out with, well, I mentioned my mantra before about, you don't know what you can't do. And I guess the big thing I have for everybody is don't be afraid to do the things that are hard, because they're incredibly rewarding when you somehow figure out how to conquer it. So, don't be afraid. There's nothing worse than fear. Fear is the thing that stifles all growth, stifles all opportunity. And just realize that it's just a thing. You can get past it. You can go off and do those things that are hard, but again, they're just incredibly rewarding. I'm so glad that I didn't stay the paperboy in Taylor.
Yeah, Taylor Tucky, I think
Taylor
people
Tucky,
used to.
absolutely.
So, do you remember Deming's 8th principle of management?
Uh, I can't remember. I can't remember.
It's drive out fear.
Drive out fear. There you go.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. Didn't mean to set you up for.
That's okay. You know what? It's as I get older, I realize I don't remember everything. There's certain things I do remember that I don't know why I remember. I remember almost every piece of code I ever wrote, and I somehow can draw on it and reproduce it, which is crazy to think about. But sometimes I have trouble with names. Sometimes I have trouble with, actors in a movie. What did they play in?
Yeah.
That happens. It's just I only have so much RAM. And
You only have to remember google.com.
There you go.
If you can remember that, you're all right.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Jerry. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you so much, Don.
No problem.
I can't wait till we can handshake. We'll probably give each other hugs and all that stuff.
You deserve a hug. I really do.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show and telling this great story of your evolution of paperboy to big shot entrepreneur.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. Or Don. I don't know why I've said that twice
it's
now.
That RAM thing. It's that RAM thing.
Well, it wasn't because I was doing that. It was because I was going to say to join every damn day. And we will see you later tomorrow at 2. Every damn day. There is every damn day. Talk to you later, guys. See you later.
Ciao.
Yeah. Bye-bye.